You're listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
Without further ado, we have our first guest today, the one and only James Robbins, who is the deputy editor of RARE, and you can go to rare.us to check out all that he's working on and the great work that they're doing. Jim, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Brett, how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing great. I mean, it's for those of us, Jim, who enjoy history and have, watched all the different things that we've seen over the decades. This particular period, this particular administration, I think, is really becoming one for the ages, isn't it?
Oh, I'd say so. Given record deficits, fiscal irresponsibility, total lack of foreign policy, outsized surveillance state issues, lack of trust. Where's the good news, I wonder?
Well, the Mets had a day off yesterday, and so they didn't lose. But that has nothing to do with the administration, of course.
For sure.
Now, I know you've been working a lot on this one particular issue, so of course I'd like to start off with the NSA and the leaker who has come forward. Well, of course, he's not coming forward from within our borders, but Edward Snowden. And one, I'd like to, if you could explain to our audience a little bit of background on this fellow, and then we'll start off with that point.
Oh, well, for what we know, or from what he claims, Snowden was a contractor with Booz Allen. He was working for the NSA. He had previously worked for the CIA. I'm not sure if that was in a government capacity or contractor capacity, but clearly he was a guy who got to know the inner workings of these agencies and what they're doing. And then, of course, he got hold of some documents that were highly classified that he leaked to the Washington Post and to the, I guess it was the Daily Mail in Britain. And, now the rest has ensued. I mean, he's created this massive controversy over the scope and extent of secret surveillance by the intelligence community on everyday Americans, which most people wouldn't think is happening, but which apparently is.
Yeah, I don't want to get too into it, but I want to let you know something that actually happened to me today regarding the NSA and what the United States government is doing. As you're aware, John and I have this company, separate from the radio show, and we deal in technologies and things of that nature. And we're working on a deal in France. And, of course, the people we're working with, their biggest concern is privacy on the Internet, which is why we're creating the things that we are. And so the question that came up today is, where is all your information stored? Is it stored on servers in the United States or outside the United States? Because it may have a lot to do with whether we do a deal with you. And bells went off in my head, and I go, I can't believe this. Again, my federal government, in what's supposed to be the freest nation in the world, we are supposed to be the beacon of freedom, may be the obstacle, the roadblock to another business deal. And, of course, we'll come up with an alternative, but I'm not the only one, Jim, that's going to come across this.
Well, no, and see, this is part of the legal angle. When they say everything that was done was legal, the thing you have to understand is that there are statutory limits on what certain branches of the intelligence community can do inside the United States, but there are no practical limits to what they can do outside of the United States. So then you get into an interesting definitional question of what constitutes inside and outside. Now, with the Internet, that when you send an email, for example, it pings off a bunch of different locations, and then it finally winds up where it's supposed to go. But those locations could be all over the place. It's not like there's a direct line from you to the recipient. I mean, these things bounce around all over. So suppose there's a major node that's outside the United States. Say it's in Britain, or say it's in Canada, or who knows where, just outside the legal limits. Well, anything that goes through that node is open for intercept by, say, NSA. And we already know that they've collected inside the U.S. I mean, we knew that in the Bush administration, that they were doing that with the cooperation of AT&T. But if they had something set up outside the country where there was, a node that they knew everything passed through, then yeah, absolutely, all of that stuff is up for grabs. And it's not that, they say, oh, well, that makes it legal. Yeah, but maybe that's not the question. Maybe the law is wrong, or maybe the application of the law is wrong, because whereas that may be within the letter, it's certainly not within the spirit, and I doubt it's within what most Americans would consider to be the mission of the intelligence community.
Well, I think there are so many issues here, Jim. I mean, first of all, as we've seen for these past few decades, technology advancing at such a great rate, and the world just becoming so open. I mean, literally, you could within seconds speak to anybody in any part of the world as long as they have some form of communication, whether it be wired or wireless. And so, of course, all the laws that apply to this, not just here in the United States, but international laws and laws in other countries, are all going to have to be looked at and ensure that partnerships and relationships from state to state aren't being violated, or we certainly don't want to cause any more friction than we normally have, in just the regular course of our lives and our business. But so in a sense, Jim, I don't agree with what this guy has done, but I think that the fact that we're having this debate and this discussion is a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's healthy. He probably could have figured out a better way to do it, but people need to know exactly what's going on out there. And the main reason I think so is because of the utter lack of trust between us and our government. I read something from Al Franken, Senator Franken. Okay, he's an elected U.S. senator. I have no problem with that. I have issues with his policies, that he advocates, but nevertheless, he is who he is. But he was saying that, this isn't really about privacy or something, that this is about other things. Well, with respect, he may know all the secrets, but we don't. And the lack of trust is institutional. We have Stephanie Cutter, a former co-chair of Obama's campaign, who had previously been on his White House staff, saying that with respect to the IRS commissioner, that she was in on these meetings, so there's nothing, untoward about them. Oh, really? The fact that she was there, that somehow in her mind that makes it all on the up and up? We're supposed to say, oh, well, if you were there, it was fine? She's part of the problem. I mean, if anything, her being there makes me more suspicious. So the government, even if they want to argue that all this stuff is legal and that it's necessary and that it breaks up terror attacks, they have to remake the bond between us and them and really do the work. They can't just say, oh, it's legal, so back off, or shut up or stop looking at this. We have to know that there are safeguards in place, and not just because they say so. Somehow they have to find some other means to prove it to us, that this information has not been misused, that it is not subject to political exploitation, that it is not being used for personal gain. The wealth of information they have is basically everything on everybody. And that's a pretty powerful tool for whatever it is. Blackmail, extortion, personal grudges, investment opportunities with inside information, rigging political elections, things of that nature. We have to know somehow that it's not being used for those purposes. And I think that's a pretty hard thing for the government to prove, because you can't have that kind of power concentrated in one place and it not be abused.
I agree with you on all those points, and quite frankly, and I've read Peter Schweizer's books, I think he's made a very good point for why we can't trust at least members of Congress with all the corruption and cronyism that goes on there. So why, and look at all the scandals within this administration. So that's 2 points of government, and then we see some of the decisions that come from the courts over all these years, and so that's 3 points of government. And then we have a media that quite often fails to report. Either they leave out facts or they choose not to cover some things that they should, depending on what their particular political feelings are. I mean, so, yeah, we're concerned.
Oh, yeah, concerned to say the least. It's really out of control when you think about it, of what they could do with this stuff. Now, I'm not saying they have done it or they will do it or anything like that. But nevertheless, just the attitude right now, like, well, it's all legal, so, or we need it, or something like this, or the idea that we need everything about everybody to protect our country against a terror attack. Well, do they really need that much information to protect everybody? Do they need information on 100% of the people when they're trying to catch 1 or 2 people? Or even if it's 1,000 terrorists around the world, even if it's 10,000 terrorists around the world, do you really need all the information on 300 million Americans plus whatever they pick up overseas, billions of pieces of information? I mean, one stat I saw was they were collecting 100 million pieces of information inside this country every day. 100 million pieces of information every day. But think about it. Do they really need all that stuff just to keep us safe? I tend not to believe it. And even if they do, to keep us 99.9% safe, can't we accept a little bit of risk in our lives? Getting back to Franklin's aphorism about the trade-off between liberty and security, I mean, can't we accept a little bit more danger in our lives if it means the government isn't taking every single email that we send?
Well, I agree with you. And, Boston's a perfect case, where you have foreign nations calling us up to say, hey, you got to check these guys out. And we failed there. And there are other times we've just plain gotten lucky. But we've had plenty of failures on warnings on different people from time to time, or the fact that, how about this? I love this one, Jim. They're so afraid to profile, yet if you go to the Senate food bill, the S-210 from a couple of years back, that entire bill is about profiling. What they're doing here in the NSA is about profiling. And so it's like when they want to, they're willing to profile. But to me, they're not making the most efficient use of where they're trying to get. And quite frankly, I think there's, what percentage of the people in this country really need to have their phones monitored? What percentage of organizations? What types of groups really? Where I think, Jim, if you monitor the data and then you find a call coming from somebody you'd suspect to an outside place, then you go through the proper authorities and get permission to go further. Doesn't that make sense?
Well, yeah, that would make a lot of sense. That's how criminal investigations are conducted. You have probable cause, so you look into something, and then you investigate it. But the basis of that is the Fourth Amendment and the notion of probable cause. What if the government was stopping every single car on the highway and searching it, rummaging about, looking for something? Yeah, I'll bet you'd find a lot of stuff. I'll bet you'd find a lot of stolen cars. You'd probably find a lot of people carrying drugs in their vehicles, doing other things. But 99.9% of the people would just be driving along, getting hassled by the cops. So really it gets back to that trade-off and the reason why we have these rights. We are not presumed guilty in this country. We are presumed innocent. And to have the federal government with the, claiming the right to be able to look into every single thing we do, to completely violate our privacy, and to keep us under continual surveillance for our own safety and our own good in their claim, that's just wrong. That isn't America, period.
I agree 100%. Now, Jim, let's take a look at Edward Snowden here. And the first question I have, and you discuss this in your article, is does he have something to fear about, and is this the type of action that he's taken that the CIA or the federal government would go after him?
Yeah, that's why you're referring to my most recent piece on Rare, I take it.
Yes.
Today's commentary. The reason I wrote that was a couple reasons. One was this notion that maybe he's going to be disappeared because an editor for The Atlantic overheard some guys at Dulles Airport who were apparently intelligence community guys kind of blowing off steam about this and saying, he should be disappeared. Whether these guys were just screwing around or whatever, or even members of the intelligence community, who knows. And the other was in the Washington Post, where Snowden had said that he felt that his life was in jeopardy, and the reporter to whom he gave that message said he didn't believe it literally. But you have to believe it literally, because our government kills people. I mean, that's the bottom line. I'm not judging that either. Maybe there are people who need to get killed. I mean, dangerous people out there. The whole point of this NSA experiment is to provide actionable intelligence to our guys to go out and solve problems. Now, whether that's rounding a guy up and, having a foreign government take care of him, or having a rendition or something, or whether it's firing a Hellfire missile at him, this is what our guys do, and they do it every day. So to have a Washington Post reporter say, well, he couldn't have really meant it. Well, Snowden is from that community. He knows what goes on, and he knows what the object of all this is. So if he thinks his life is in jeopardy, I would listen to him. Because to me, we have a president who has said that he has the legal right to assassinate Americans abroad without due process. The White House has made that legal claim. They say it's classified. They won't explain it, which is bizarre. How can you keep a constitutional principle a secret? But anyway, the point is they claim it. So if the president signs a finding, which is a requirement under an executive order regarding assassinations, EO 12333, if he signs a finding regarding this guy and says, go get him, then our guys can go get him. And Snowden has every reason to worry about that.
Again, all good points you're bringing up. And I have to say, Jim, in my personal opinion, and this is my thought, that if you have a guy like Snowden that makes a claim that he knows where all of our CIA operatives are and where their stations are and who they are, and that he's over in Hong Kong and willing to possibly go to China or Russia or one of our other potential adversaries or past adversaries or even current adversaries, you have to take that as serious a threat as possible, because what are the ramifications to the United States if that information were handed over to China or Russia? How many American lives would die as a result?
Oh, well, that's true. Foreign governments aren't very shy about executing people who are working for the United States. To them, they're traitors. And they are traitors. They're traitors to their country if they're working for our country, so I can understand that. Mm-hmm. Back in the 70s, we had a guy named Philip Agee, who was a former CIA agent who went rogue, and he released the names of a lot of our covert operatives, some of whom wound up disappearing, some of whom were just shot down in the streets. These kind of things happen. With Snowden, we really have to separate two issues. One is the domestic surveillance privacy issue and, the sort of out-of-control role of the government. But the other side of him is the national security issue of where he's really doing damage to us. If he did release the names of covert operatives working abroad, that would be so terrible, because those human factors, the human intelligence, the agents, the contacts, the networks that you develop, those are long-term investments. They take a long time to build. They're expensive, and they are the most effective means of developing intelligence. The technical side, satellite surveillance, all that, that's really good and that's valuable, but it's the people who get inside the room. It's the people who can read the expression on someone's face or really give us the inside dope. Those are critical folks, and if this guy, Snowden, releases information that gets those people killed, then he's really harming us.
I'm very borderline as if he's committed treason here, because I don't know if we fully understand or have the 100% facts of what he has released here. And so it is possible he's already committed treason, but certainly giving up that information is absolute treason. And the idea of even putting someone like that in prison, to me, is stupid. I think that we, in these situations where it's so serious, so critical to our national security, this is where you execute somebody, and you make it very clear that there is no tolerance, there is no leeway. And by the way, Jim, I keep reading articles that say the laws are very unclear on this. How could they be unclear? It should be crystal clear as to if you're committing an act of treason or not. And every American should know what the law is, what that line is, and be very clear that this is where you are when you cross it, and this is what happens to you when you do.
Oh, yeah. It's not unclear to people who are involved with that. If you're somebody who holds a high-level clearance from the government, you have to go through mandatory counterintelligence briefings on what you can do, what you can't do, and so forth. It's very, having been through them myself, I can tell you, it's very explicit. In fact, these briefings usually wind up with a few stories of here's what happens when you break the law, and then they talk about people who did various bad things and went to jail. So, the notion that it's unclear, well, it may be unclear to a bunch of, folks who want to sit around chatting about it, or, lawyers who want to try to make a novel case, but within the government, it's very clear. And when you have something that's marked top secret, sensitive intelligence, no foreign distribution, and so forth, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that you want to keep that secret or you're breaking the law.
What do you think this guy's real motivations were here? Because I'm not convinced that it was just exposing the NSA, or I don't see why he would have went to Hong Kong.
Well, I don't know. Hong Kong is as good a place as another. I'm not sure. I was trying to figure out today what his escape plan is. And, of course, we only know what's open and reported. He might be, he said something about going to Iceland or something like this. But he might have just said that to throw people off his trail. We don't know if he's already working with or for a foreign government. It's a lot we don't know. So it's kind of hard to Monday morning quarterback it, whether he has a good plan or not, because if he does have a good plan, we're not going to know about it until it's executed. We may never hear from him again. That doesn't mean that he's dead. It could mean that he's in deep cover in a foreign country. It could mean that he was apprehended and, is taken to a secret prison somewhere or some other interrogation spot where he's being debriefed, There are a lot of different possibilities. But we have to acknowledge that we may not know everything. I'm certain we don't know everything right now. We may never know everything.
Now, one last point that I think has to be brought up, and that is the members of Congress. We don't have to touch on the administration because that's a whole other story, But I keep reading things from, some of the comments from members of Congress, some calling him a traitor, some saying, calling him a hero, some discussing the idea that it's terrible that the government would be looking at information. And it's interesting, in fact, that it seems there are a lot of Democratic members of Congress who are all for what he did because they think that the government's violating people's privacy, and which is kind of the opposite of where they'd normally be, because going after conservative groups is fine for them, but in this case, it's not. But I have to say, how many members of Congress are aware of this program going on? What is the typical protocol for those who aren't in these very secure committees in Congress that are privy to this information? What is shared with the other members? Well,
nothing practically should be shared with other members. You have the chairs and co-chairs of different committees, the Select Committee on Intelligence or whatever. I would guess there are about 4 to 6. I've heard different estimates, but probably no more than 4 to 6 members in each body who would really be up to speed on this, because it's the kind of thing that you want to keep compartmentalized. When the president says every member of Congress knew, that's just wrong. Every member of Congress would not know about this. Members of Congress whose committees are not connected to these matters wouldn't want to know about this. They wouldn't want to have that information because it would just be a burden to them. So I think that the responsible members on the various intelligence committees who have been briefed in closed meetings, they would know something about this. But they're only going to know what they get briefed on. They probably weren't read into every single aspect of this. And, the executive branch tries to report to Congress as little as it can.
So the bottom line is...
And stay within the law. But anyway.
Right. So the bottom line is we need to ensure that the most senior members of Congress and those who are usually on these types of committees are the very best people we can find because, for obvious reasons. And so... No, it's very, very good stuff today, Jim. And I have been following your articles through the week and your different lines of reasoning. And I think it's just another in a line of big issues, not specifically brought on by this administration, but definitely happening during their administration. And one last comment I have is, Jay Carney's out there talking about, comparing Obama not being like Bush. Well, of course not. He wishes he could be as good as George Bush. But I find it ironic that a lot of the programs under Bush and before have continued under Obama, and we've gotten certainly something far different than what we were promised.
This program is far greater under Obama than it was under Bush. It brings in far many more resources, far many more companies, and President Obama has assassinated way many more people than George Bush ever did. So.
All great points. Well, James Robbins, the deputy editor of RARE, and you can go to rare.us to follow all of his articles and everything else that the good folks at RARE are doing. Jim, we'll catch you on your show tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, and that, of course, is the Conservative Connection. Great as always, Jim. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Wish your brother a happy birthday.
Thanks, Jim. Take it easy.
Okay.
Hey, B, why don't we take a quick break, and we'll come right back and pick up the discussion.